Hey, what up guys, it's ARTFX, and today I'm gonna be showing you how I made this bass. So here we are. This is just the bass by itself. So I'm gonna be going over how I created that, and I have to start with something different first, which is creating the actual sound. So as you can see, there is a clusterfuck of automation going on right here, and I think I'm just gonna go through all of this one by one. Let's just get rid of that automation for now. Let's focus on one track first, which is this one. This is the actual patch, the actual operator patch that I used for this track. I started out with just a sine wave, I think, yeah. So just a sine wave on a low E note. Yes, and see, that's just your plain sine wave sub. That is then being modulated by another one, which is, well, almost a sine wave, but it's just, it has a little bit of the third and a little bit of the fifth harmonic as well, so it just adds a few more harmonics on top of the fundamental frequency. And the fundamental frequency is one ratio higher than the fundamental frequency, which is down to 0.5, and I brought the fine tune up to 10, so that gives it a little bit of modulation. You can see it here in the volume as well. So that is then being modulated by another one, which is set to a coarse value of 9, and I brought the fine tune up to 18, and this one is again a sine wave. And it's barely up right now, but that's because that one is being automated. And I think, yeah, that's this bottom automation track. That one. So that gives it some more upper harmonics. Listen. So then I added another operator, which is, let's see, set to the coarse value of 3, fine tune of 20, and then I basically did the same thing again. I automated the level on the fourth operator, and as you can see, that's this automation lane, so just going down here and then slowly going down. Adds a little bit more variation to it, and I've done some different things over here, as you can see, and it's just repeating itself, same as with the other one. I basically just copied it over a bunch of times. So if we now listen to the sound, you can clearly hear it as a sub bass, but there's kind of like another sine wave sitting on top, kind of like an octave higher maybe. So I looked at it through a spectrum, and you can see it right here, right? But it's pretty loud, so I kind of like took an EQ8 and completely removed it. Well, almost completely. It's much lower now, so I think that sounded much better, and it really just, well, I don't know, it just changes the sound a bunch. And I think because we're distorting this afterwards, I think that really has a big impact on the actual distortion in the sound. You can also see I brought down the high frequencies a little bit with this high shelf. So that's just that, and that other one is just adding a little bump there. It's just to shape the sound basically. Then that is running into an audio effect rack, and here I'm doing some crazy stuff. First I started by creating basically a sub chain. So that's just a sub bass, and then I went on with this particular one. And the main goal for me right here was to create some sort of a crunchy, distorted sound sitting on top of the bass. I started out with a phaser, added some modulation to it with the LFO. That's just adding some panning as well and some stereo modulation, and it's just making it sound a little bit more interesting. That is then running through a bandpass filter, and I think, yeah, so these two tracks right here, these two tracks are actually the filter frequency and the resonance. Now, what I did here is I basically just turned off, because I just turned this knob off, this record arm button, turn it off, and when you click record, then you can actually twist something in here and it will only record the automation. It will not record or overwrite the notes that you've got going in here, but it will basically only record the automation itself. So I just took this graph and just started sliding it around while the note was playing like that. Just started doing some cool stuff, and that's basically what I did. So that's how I ended up with this. Now there's some big volume spikes going on now, so I'm gonna put a limiter on here, just so I don't hurt your ears. But you can see, because I'm actually moving that bandpass into the sub-region a lot of times as well, with a pretty high resonance, it creates these really loud volume spikes, and those will really affect the way it goes into the distortion later on. So it's all about creating interesting stuff. So, you know, I pretty much looped these two automation tracks, but these other two are just completely random for the entire, what is it, almost 1.5 minutes. So you're gonna end up with a really long clip with a lot of bunch of interesting sounding things, and then it's just a matter of chopping it up and rearranging things to make something that sounds, well, good. So then I tried to add the crunchy high end, which I did with the erosion. Now I personally never really used the erosion, but it's really good for this. So I took the erosion and it turned this into this. Now it might not be that audible, but there's now some kind of a white noise layer in there, pretty much only when it goes up into the higher parts of the bandpass filter, and that gives it a really interesting sound. Especially we're gonna compress and distort this afterwards, so that crunchy sound that's now just barely audible is actually gonna be really audible in the end. So then I decided to just add an overdrive. I think this is just a default setting basically. And now you can already hear that crunchy white noise on top. So then I actually recorded myself some, well, some sounds of me crunching a piece of paper in front of my microphone, and that sounds a little like this. And I just put that in here. I think I looped it a bunch of times or did some, you know, chopping and rearranging on it. And that is then running through an EQ8 to basically cut out all the low frequencies, because a clip like this, if we look at it, you can see pretty much the sub frequencies are the loudest in the sound, even though it's a pretty high-pitched kind of sound, a really high frequency sound. But you can see the sub is pretty much going on continuously, so I just go in there and I high pass that. So we only have that. Then I added a little bit of a reverb to it to kind of like give it some room. And then I did an auto pan, And that's turning it into that. It's creating these almost granular sounding effects. And it might be really quiet by now, but if I turn this up a bit, so that sounds pretty cool. And then I just added a Valhalla room after it. A pretty short room size, pretty short decay size actually. It's the medium room. Pretty short decay, but almost halfway mix setting. And that just gives it even more, well, how do you say it? Even more ambience, I guess, even more room sounds. So it's also pretty much where all the stereo width in the sound is coming from. Because the bass itself, other than the phaser on it, is pretty much mono. There's pretty much no stereo going on. In the operator I haven't even used the spread, because I'm not really that much of a fan of that one. But now, with that paper crunching sound on top of it, kind of like sounds like this. See, you can hear where that comes in. So that's basically just random, by the way. I haven't really gone in too much and, you know, fine-tuned where each of these parts are. No, I just took a long recording and just put it in there, and that's basically what I did. This is all about getting as much sounds going as you can, and then just, you know, working with it afterwards and chopping out the bits that you like. How long are we? 14 minutes already, damn. I gotta speed this up, guys. So then I run that into Isotope Trash, and what I'm doing here is I'm basically just adding a whole bunch of distortion. So on the bottom layer there's nothing going on. Then on the mid layer I'm using the electric trash, and I brought up the drive and the pre-gain a little bit. And on the high end I've used the double stages, that's in the drive category. The other one is in the distort category. And I just brought up the drive a bunch, basically. And that's pretty much all I did here. So after the trash, first it sounds like that. And then with trash on it, this might be loud, bear with me. There we go. I'm almost like destroying the sound even. Then I'm actually adding this EQ8, and this is pretty cool because here I'm actually automating this particular one, which is a notch again, and yeah, I'm pretty much automating the frequency and the Q. So those are these two automation lanes. Again, I just took this dot and just moved it around. That's what I did, and that turns it into this. So just doing that for like 1.5 minutes, you get a whole bunch of random shit. You know, you never know what you're gonna end up with. Then I did it another time, but this time with an auto filter. I don't know why, but I just did it. And this time I automated the resonance. I haven't even done the frequency on this one. I used the LFO, and the LFO is basically moving the frequency right now, but I just moved the resonance, which is this one, the top one, and then I used the rate on the LFO to basically speed up and slow down the movement of that LFO on the filter frequency. So that just adds another notch filter on top of it. Just to add more variation. That's basically all I'm doing here. Then I took an EQ, just scooped out again, I think that second harmonic, and just completely dipped down the mids. Just starts to sound a bit better now. Then I'm adding this compressor, which I think isn't even compressing. It's just there in case I get a huge volume spike. It'll just chop it off using the soft clipping function. That's it for the entire first phase. That's then recorded to an audio file. And that audio file is this one. That's basically the audio file. And on here I did some more processing. So I took another isotope trash 2. And this time on the low band, the sub band, I have a tape saturation. And you can see I played around a little bit with the crossover frequencies. So they're set a little bit different than the default value, but you can basically just see the values right here. I used tape saturation on the bottom layer. Then on the mid layer I used the, on the drive section, the cactus. And I haven't done too much to it other than just that, just throwing it on there. And I think, oh yeah, there's another stage as well. Second stage is the tube drainer, and that's really low in the mix because that really makes it sound super dirty. I mean, that's not enjoyable, so I just brought it down. The high frequencies, also doing a couple of distortion things here, using the using the dystropia. I don't know how to say that. So yeah, I'm just using that, and I basically just curved this up, which adds some more saturation to it. And the second stage is the fry, which is just making sound really crunchy, and that one is also really low in the mix. So, well, this is really loud right now, so I'm gonna bring it down a bit. So you can hear really how all those volume spikes now start to affect the distortion, which is pretty much what I wanted. So after that, of course, we have another autofilter. This time I'm only automating the frequency, and I basically just done the same thing again, moved the knob randomly, but this time I just took this knob and moved it around randomly with my mouse. So that's basically what I did, and that turns it into this. Now you can see though I'm not really moving it into the sub frequencies during most of the clip. So it's only affecting the higher frequencies. But you can already hear that there's really some interesting stuff going on right now in this clip. And there's definitely some cool sounds in here. So then I just did another EQ just to shape the sound a little bit. Then I used this one, which is actually a saturation plugin. I'm not really doing too much with it. It's not adding too much actually to the sound. I'm just driving the input gain and bringing down the output gain. And I'm not really sure if you are gonna hear what it does. It really saturates the bass a lot. You know, the bass really gets a nice warm edge to it. But you might not be able to hear that without headphones. Then I have an OTT, just some multiband dynamics, some compression, which is really just squashing it a lot. And I brought the amount down, so it's not really a fully compressed signal, it's just a little bit of it. But you know, when I bring this up all the way, it's gonna sound like that. I just brought it down to about 20%. And then I have a little trick to basically, you know, what a lot of people are struggling with a lot of times is getting their basses fat, you know? Especially when you're doing stuff like this, when you're really adding a lot of automation and doing these neuro-y kind of sounds. Well, the thing is, you really want to compress the shit out of a bass like that. You basically just want to turn the bass into a sausage. So after you've done that, you will actually be able to chop out the parts where the kick drums and snares are. So you kind of like make room for it. But other than that, my basses are pretty much a sausage shape, pretty much like that. So that's what I'm doing here. You can see I brought the attack all the way down and brought the release up to 1.2 milliseconds. I think it's 1.2 milliseconds, or is it seconds? I think it's seconds actually. So 1.2 seconds, and you can see I brought the threshold down quite a lot and the makeup gain all the way up. So that's just doing this. Turning that into that. So now you can actually hear that every time we get a little bit quieter volume, it just crushes it upwards, you know, it just brings it up. So all these reverb tails and these crunchy sounds that are happening during those moments are actually brought up a lot. So in the end what you get is just this sausage of a waveform, which is just one big fest of fucking modulations, and then it's just a matter of, you know, chopping it up. So that brings me to the last phase, which is actually the sound design, or the arrangement phase, I have to say. So what I did here is I just started with a kick and snare and a hi-hat. So that's pretty standard, and then I added this, well, basically just a couple of chops of synths and stuff like that. And then all these are actually just little chops and little bits and pieces of these long ass files that you've seen just now. And I actually compressed it even more using Maximus. So I just compressed it even more, because it wasn't compressed enough. I mean, come on. Actually, that even brings up all the fades again as well, so I'm not sure why I did that, but it sounds cool. And I did another one right here on which I think I brought the mids up a lot more, yeah. So the mids are brought up a lot more, because this particular one, if I bring it down on this track, it has a, well, not really that much mid. So I wanted that particular hit to have a lot more mids, so I just added it on a different track. So now I could actually say stuff like, I want some alternating rhythm between these two tracks, you know, stuff like, see, you can hear that the first one has less mid than the second one. You know, you could do stuff like that. It's cool. What I just did, that particular hit. And then on the end I have this other hit, which is basically doing the same thing, but here I have a high pass filter on it and a little bit of reverb, so it gives it that kind of weird sound. Same thing here, which is just a different part of the whole clip, and that all together just creates the whole bass line. I mean, if we combine that with the synth chops, so I guess I can show you how I do this. I can at least try. Let's move these over to here. Do that. I'm gonna copy these synth hits as well. So now we just have and let's just take a random clip from here and let's zoom in and let's get started. let's see if I can make something cool with this. So this is just a big ass long clip, and now it's just a matter of finding something that sounds cool. And I'm using the fades a lot here, so you can see. You can see you can actually create some cool stuff. So let's add another one in here, but with a different sound. Maybe some of these higher stuffs. That sounds nice. Maybe do... oh wait. Let's drop these down in pitch because we're working in E. That's something you gotta remember though, what key everything is in. Let's make longer clips for now. We could also do something like this maybe, where you have smaller clips, something like this, and then maybe do a shorter one right here. I don't really like that first one, so I guess I would maybe pitch it up a little bit. Or, you know, work with this one, because this one actually sounds pretty cool. Maybe just add one right here with a little bit of a fade like that, and then it's just a matter of finding a bit that sounds cool. That's nice. And then I would just, you know, copy this and then maybe take it out right here and change this part up quite a bunch. And you can also fade clips into each other, right? So that's actually pretty cool as well. So, you know, you can hear it's not perfect right now, but that's pretty much how I would do it. And you know, you can change things if you want. Let's say you want to change this second part, you don't really like that. You just go in, find where you are, and then just, you know, move it around. That actually sounds cool, you know? You know, maybe we want to change this first one as well. And let's make it a bit longer, so that it is long enough for that one to sound better. So, you know, it's just a matter of trial and error right now. It's just a matter of finding things that sound cool. just take a part like that, just like this. You can add this, for instance, on the track that's lower, and it will have a little bit more mid now. Maybe I want to do the same with this one. So I think that sounds actually pretty cool. Let's do that. Let's do this. This sounds actually pretty cool. That sounds nice. So now we have see, so you know, obviously it doesn't really sound that good compared to what I have going right here. But that's mostly because I worked a lot more on that last part. This just took a lot more time than what I spend right now on this one. But you know, it's not bad necessarily. I mean, it still sounds good. It's just a matter of fiddling around with these little bits and pieces until you have something that sounds cool. So that's basically how I create my basses nowadays, how I work a lot with resampling and chopping things up. I feel, for me at least, especially when you want to make genres like these, when you try to do everything in the project itself, you're just gonna get stuck. You know, you're just gonna get stuck a lot of times. I don't like to do it that way. I always get stuck when I work pretty much making my sounds as I go in my tracks. So these days I just like to do this. So I have for instance, I have this little cool folder right here, and this folder is just filled with these kind of sounds. So see? And I have a whole folder of that, so that's just basically all kinds of interesting bass sounds, and these are all really long, by the way. I mean, these are like, most of them are like over 1 minute, 2 minutes, sometimes even more than 5 minutes, and I can just use those in my tracks, just arrange interesting bass lines from them. They're all labeled by key as well, so that just helps me around. And these are all basses I made myself, so that's definitely gonna give my tracks a little bit more of an original feeling, because, you know, I made these, so I think they sound good, and that's why I'm using them. But nobody else is gonna have these exactly the same sounds. So yeah, I cannot say that often enough. Just spend some time, you know, just experimenting, bouncing down some interesting clips that you've made, and don't be afraid to bounce down a 2-minute long clip, you know, even though you don't know what you're going to be using it for. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. If you liked this video, comment, like, and subscribe. Help me to grow this channel up to 50,000. That would be great. Other than that, if you want to have some sample packs or preset packs, you can check out my website, which is www.artfx-studios.com. And I'll be back pretty soon with another bass design video, or maybe some other sound design stuff. I'm gonna get back to working on my EP right now, and I'll see you back soon. Peace!